Welcome back to Breaking Down Storage Tech. Today we're breaking down the Yu Miss, specifically the Yu Miss slice. Now, the whole system was put together by siderXD, but because we're breaking down the slice, there are some extra credits. We got the cart miss designed by acaciachan. We have the box loader by Roy J, and the whole slice in itself designed by siderXD. So let's get straight into it. So what is a miss slice? Well, this is a little bit more than a miss slice, and that's why I'm really a big fan of this as a whole, just because of how practical it is, especially for early game. So a miss slice, or in this case a cart miss slice, is a multi-item sorter. So you have your traditional filter up here where you can only sort one item at a time. So in this case it's glass. Well, a miss slice allows you to sort multiple items per slice. And a slice is just like this, where we have one long line right here. And as you can see in this chest, we can sort all of these items at the top right here, and all the way up to something down here if you want to set it up like that. And I just think that's great. And a cart miss is specifically a multi-item sorter that uses hopper minecarts or chest minecarts to get the job done, as opposed to just regular hoppers like the Mooney miss. Now, this chest haul also has a bulk slice, and a bulk slice, it basically means that we store items in bulk in shulker boxes packed up neatly. So as you can see, we have glass right here, fully filled shulker boxes as such. And then we just have a chest right here, and that's kind of makes it a accessible chest haul, but we won't get too into the details. Now, this can sort items up to 8 times hopper speed, but this truly depends on how diverse the items is. So we're breaking today just the slice. As you can see, we're just breaking down the slice. So I just want to give you guys some context of what's happening in here, or so that way we get here. So essentially, once you input the items, what we're getting for the miss slice right here is just this right here. These shoes back. So you get your hopper minecart, and then you have your items like this if they're 64 stackable, or like this if they're 16 stackable. So what you do is you have a maximum of a stack, and then you take one item out. And this is the same, or if you don't have a full stack, so let's say you just put 32, you'll still get one item taken out just because of redundancy of how the system is designed. But at a maximum, you'll have 64 or 15 right here. And that will be going down these rails right here. And we also sort our bulk items like this. And what do I mean by that? Well, essentially what we have is in the system, if I fly all the way over here, we have an additional slice, as you can see, bulk item slice, where we put all our bulk items in these mine carts as a miss slice. So we sort it, so we get the cart, and it goes through the regular cart path, but it gets broken and shot into this water stream up here, where it then just becomes regular SSI filters, which we'll talk about in this video. And that's all the context you need to know before we actually start breaking this down. Essentially, for the miss slice itself, that applies to all items, including bulk items, but it'll be slightly different, as you saw right there. Kind of it ends here, the path of the bulk items, where it goes all the way up to there, while with regular miss items, they get broken and they get sorted into these chests right here. And as for the bulk items, their path is a little bit longer, because once they make it through the miss slice, they get broken and they get into their stack of 63 and dumped right here into these rails right here, or this water stream right here. As you can see, there's a little bit of water, more clearly seen all the way over there. You can see there's a nice little water stream. So let's just get straight into it. So we have our rails going, or our minecart right here, going down these powered rails. And these rails right here just get their power from levers down here, as well as these rails right here, but that's just a side note. So what's going to happen is, because we're using minecarts with hoppers right here, if I just chuck it up here, we'll have them passing down. And what ends up happening is, as soon as they cross over into this part right here, as soon as they get their hitbox under the chest, they will pull out the item if it's the same type. So let's say we're taking logs, and we have our cart right here, and we have it stacked to 63 right here. And I'll just chuck this. here. So we have our cart like this. Well, what will happen is when it gets passed underneath these rails right here, what will happen is it'll actually pull out this log right here. In this case, I just have it right here. It'll pull it, chuck it in here. Now, what then happens is this comparator in 2 ticks will notice, hey, we no longer have this log right here. So if I pull it out, you can see the the rail gets retracted, and this will include the minecart on top. And we can actually test this if I just take a chest minecart. We're not using a hopper minecart because it'll pull the items, but if I just put this right here and then pull the item, as you can see, it continues on the next bit of its journey, but it does get pulled here. And that brings us swiftly on to the next part of this, is because after the 2 ticks, the sticky piston will immediately start its retraction, because the retraction of a piston is instant when it's being unpowered. And what happens is, as you just saw there, the rail connects over here and lines up like so that way the minecart can snap through and onto these rails right here. This is where we continue our journey, and as soon as the cart makes its way over here, and has the tiniest bit of its hitbox crossing over, then this hopper, which is naturally unlocked, will pull the first item slot out. In this case, that's our first shear. Then after 8 ticks, which is the hopper cooldown that it will get from pulling the item, where the minecart is just about here, it will pull its second item. And quite quickly after that, it will then move over to here. This hopper is now obviously on cooldown, and by the time it goes back off of cooldown, the minecart is long gone. But then we just repeat the same process with 8 ticks here and here, where we just pull out the 3rd and 4th shears. And so now we have a perfect cart. So this is how we guarantee the stack size and that we don't have a bunch of other items in it. But now we've gotten rid of the dummy items, and we can continue to just sort the items. We don't have to worry about them. And these all of these shears just make their way through these hoppers right here into this bottom hopper line. Basically what happens here is these just go back into a line and fly all the way here. You can see we have the line right here, and they get yeeted into a water stream to be recycled. Once all the items get picked up, or all the shears get picked up, we just have our cart with the 64 of our log, and they get pushed over onto the soul sand, which has a bubble column, obviously, which will cause the minecarts to get yeeted up through this scaffolding. And this scaffolding will allow it to just pass through easy as that, and it will lock onto these powered rails. And it's very important they lock onto these ones, because what we're going to do is use gravity to pull them back up here and onto this place right here. Now we have the honey block here because of its hitbox. As you can see, I can go, or if I don't have creative flight on or no clip, I can go slightly into it as opposed to a regular block. So if I just push here, you can see I go in slightly. So what happens is we use that to allow the minecart to just clip into here before knocking on this wall and changing directions. So that way we pull out just a single item. Why do we do that? Well, because we want to pull out this singular log to restore it back in our filter. And what this will cause to happen is this comparator will come back on after 2 ticks, and then 2 ticks later, the sticky piston will extend, or over the course of 2 ticks, it will extend. And yeah, so our filter is ready to be run again, and this is how we get such a quick turnover rate if it's the same item. Or if it's the same item or an item in the future or later down the line, we can just, this is our minimum amount of time. Obviously, if the minecarts were earlier, if we had this filter and then a filter earlier, it wouldn't matter so much, but because we have to prepare for worst case scenarios, it will be either the same item or a later item, and that becomes our minimum minecart time. Now what then happens is once gravity takes back over and it comes over here, it gets boosted by the power rails and yeeted off this cliff right here, where we have our first check, and this is the check for if the slice is in use or at capacity, which we'll talk about when we get to the loading of the items into the chest. Basically, If these cherry fences are powered and open, the minecart just goes through gladly happy days. If the chest hall is at capacity or something like that, all we have is this cherry fence right here will be closed because this redstone block will be over here and the minecart will hit it and go down. I can repeat this with a minecart, and as we can see, it gets chucked and it gets yeeted, and then it gets yeeted all the way there into the void. It's not going to be the void in the actual case of the system, but that's just for convenience right now. Once it's made its way past this check, whether it's going down the reuse line or whether it's going onto this main line right here where it will continue into the slice, we don't know. But basically, if it does, it'll block onto these rails right here, get powered, and make its way all the way this huge jump all the way up to here onto these powered rails using the same scaffolding trick. Now they just make their way down here, and this is where we use the cauldron from before. I just realized that I hadn't marked this hopper locking line correctly, but apart from that, what happens is the rails make their way down this line right here and try to snap to these detected rails right here. And this is where we use our good old hopper or minecart eating trick. In this case, it's hopper minecarts, but basically they get yeeted in this lava cauldron. And what happens is the item gets somewhere in here, or the minecart item itself gets yeeted somewhere here, and all of the items get their way on top of this block right here. Now, because of the way yeeting works, it will be slightly or spend a tick or two on this line right here, causing the detector rail to power. And what we do then is use that to lock this hopper right here to make sure that there's no chance the minecart item makes its way into the hopper and makes its way into the system. So that way we guarantee the minecart makes its way into this hopper and then into here, which is just the minecart with a hopper line to get recycled. Now, what then ends up happening is a couple ticks later, based on the detector rail timings that I don't have off the top of my head, but after it goes off, this hopper will unlock, allowing the items to just pass through here and go through this system right here. Now, this is a really nice system where we just protect the overflow. So what ends up happening is if this hopper gets backed up from items filling all the way, so if we fill all of these chests, all of these hoppers, then this hopper will start to push, because this hopper will always pull from it before this hopper has a chance to pull. And that's just the tick order. And then this just goes into a really nice overflow line, where we have a separate chest in the system over there somewhere. And this is where we get into the cooldown thing. So this gets activated by a couple of scenarios, but if there's basically this same slice keeps getting repeated over and over again, or just unfortunate timings and such like that, or if it gets unloaded, but you realistically shouldn't be unloading the system, what ends up happening is this comparator gets activated, and what ends up happening is it powers this block to power this comparator. And so we just check for a signal strength of 2. So this prevents if it's just one item or a couple items, that has to be quite a decent backup, whether it's coming from the main system or worst case scenario, your entire overflow line is backed up, which would be very, very unfortunate. What then ends up happening is the 2 signal strength of redstone dust will be enough to power this note block right here to extend the sticky piston and move its redstone block. Now, the kind of inverse is true with this line right here, because this is AB tileable, but essentially the same applies, where we have a comparator with 2 redstone signal, or it waits for the second redstone signal to then unpower this redstone push to retract this redstone block, allowing this cherry fence to be closed. And yeah, that breaks down the whole mist slice, and I believe that was made by acaciachan. Moving on to the bulk slice. Now, as opposed to the mist slice, we are dealing with them as entity form, and what that means is we have them chucked down here, as you can see, as one nice entity, and as a stack of 63. So essentially what that means is they will be gliding across, as you can see, a line over there by that seek pickle, getting yeeted into that seek pickle, so their hitbox aligned just over these hoppers right here, as well as the packed ice, so they can just glide across. Now, this is where the SSI filter comes into play. SSI stands for signal strength independent. And what this basically means is that we can have a really nice low stack size for the item itself while still having the filter, but this does come at the cost of having to be A/B tileable. Essentially, what ends up happening is when the items get picked up, the comparators on this side have been calibrated, or this hopper has been calibrated with these filler items, so that way as soon as one extra item or two extra items, depending on the filter, gets placed over, it will power this redstone wire right here, unlocking or unpowering this redstone torch, unpowering all of these three right here, causing the whole system to be unlocked. And that will allow the items to get pulled from the first slot. And that is just your bog standard SSI output filter. On the other side, we have essentially the same thing where we have the comparator, two redstone dust, but in this case we have the redstone torch over here going down, unpowering this redstone line right here, where it just goes into this repeater right here, where it powers the hopper directly instead of powering the dropper and then the hopper. So what happens to the items once they've made it through the filter and we know that yes, they belong in this slice? Well, we will use that same principle just over here where hoppers pull before pushing to allow the items to come to this important point right here. This is where we decide whether we want them to have as like single item form or shulker box form as such right here. And because hoppers, or the bottom hopper, will always pull before this hopper has a chance to push it into the shulker box, what will end up happening is it'll pull it and push it into this dropper right here, where it will just make its natural path down into this chest right here, where we have it like such. Now, once we start to back up this filter, or this chest, and then this hopper, and then this dropper, what will end up happening is this comparator will turn on and activate this nice little light for us. And this is just a reference, I guess, but it's a nice little thing to have so you can see. So to know, okay, we filled up the chest, now we're making shulker boxes. But if we filled up the chest and we start making shulker boxes, this hopper will be entirely backed up, meaning this hopper will now be pushing into this shulker box right here. They will not get pulled down by this hopper because it's locked currently by this redstone repeater. And here we get to the trouble of single slice box loaders, and where we just don't have enough faces to interact with, because we have one face for the items to go in, we have one face right here for the box to be placed, we need one face for the item to be, or the shulker box to be broken, and then we need one face right here for the items to get pulled out. So we come to the unfortunate but necessary realization that we can't do the measuring here. So we actually measure overflow. So we can actually fill up this entire shulker box and it won't get broken. And so what ends up happening is we have to measure the overfill. So once this shulker box gets filled and we start to back up, and then fill this dropper right here, that is when this comparator will detect, hey, we're changing shulker boxes because we filled up so much. So what this comparator actually ends up doing is powering this sticky piston to extend this composter with signal strength, or a composter level of 1, as you can see at the top right there, and top middle and top left actually. Once it gets moved up, this will emit signal strength from this comparator and this comparator right here. This comparator goes into the filter right here because we want to lock it, prevent it from picking up any other items. Because if it's starting to unload, because we only get to this dropper right here, if it starts to unload even more, if it was fully filled, what will end up happening is that it will double fill this dropper with 2 items, and that will permanently lock this in shulker box breaking mode, which could cause some big trouble. Now the other signal goes to this comparator, to this repeater to power this concrete right here, powering the snow block and extending the sticky piston to push the observer downwards. And this executes a 2-tick pulse. So we have our 2-tick repeaters right here, as well as the observer that gets powered, and then 2 ticks later we have the delay. So we have 6 ticks of delay right here of the observer, and then these 2 observers. So we have 6 ticks here, and then this is 6. So this powering, or this second repeater, will power 2 ticks after this repeater. And that's because We will power this sticky piston to move this redstone block right here, and then 2 ticks later, this will unlock these hoppers by unpowering this dropper right here. 2 ticks after, just before that, what ends up happening is this observer gets extended to then break the shulker box. Now it explains why the timings need to be so precise. Because if we open this a little bit earlier, maybe one of the first items gets pulled out, and then we have an incomplete shulker box. So it breaks it, we unlock, and then relock the system as well as retract this, because we only get a quick pulse from this observer relative to the constant pulse of the composter up here keeping it up. So what then ends up happening is this observer, because it gets moved back, it will update because its position's been moved, powering these 2 droppers right here, or this dropper and this dispenser, sorry, causing this dispenser to spit out the shulker box, and then this dropper to replace the box as so. And this is just coming from this hopper line right here, where we have the main hopper line carrying all the shulker boxes for the entire system, and we pull from it with this hopper right here. Now, if you're wondering why are there composters on top of these hoppers right here, well, that's because, if I get this right, I think it's 1.20.5 hoppers are still at laggy in vanilla, unless you use something like lithium, but that's just not vanilla anymore. But essentially, pre 1.20.5, hoppers would always pull or try to pull from above them, even if there was a full solid block above them. So what we ended up finding out is that if we place a composter, instead of checking all the area, it could just check the one inventory slot for the bone meal of the composter. And that reduced the lag significantly of hoppers. So we replace this wherever we can. Now, this can be replaced post 1.20.5 because the Mojang changed it so just any solid block will stop the hopper pulling function. But some people, including me, still like to have composters just because I like the look of them. And it also makes your systems pre 1.20.5 run better because they're not dealing with the constant amount of hoppers pulling from above them. So once the shulker box has been replaced or get weeded down, what ends up happening is the shulker box gets replaced, the items start getting pulled. So we get pulled from this dropper right here, allowing this comparator to unpower, bringing the composter back down, unlocking the filter, allowing the whole filter to run again, and at the same time bringing this observer back up, resetting the system to run one more time. Now, these shulker boxes make their way down this hopper line, again using the pull before push to fit them into the shulker boxes right here in this next chest. Or if we get overflowed, we push them into here where this overflow line is technically blocked by my hopper locking attempts, but wouldn't be here in the actual system. As you can see over there, no weird levers. But that brings us nicely into the topic of hopper locking. And this system uses some really simple techniques. For example, this is just pure redstone dust where we lock all these hoppers, but this is not a fully locked hopper system. And we can actually do this right now. But if we just take a look at the slice itself, because all of the hoppers are and then just run the same command. So we count hoppers. So in 2 slices, it's about 50. It's actually exactly 50% hopper lock. Pretty cool. Or the numbers work out quite nicely. So it's exactly 50% hopper lock this slice, which means that yes, you're going to be getting a lot of lag, but again, this is a super neat system. So again, we're using the same line right here with the redstone line power here, and actually using the target block right here to redirect the line. So we get this powering right here. Obviously this hopper isn't powered because we don't have that, but we deal with this hopper right here because of the AP tileableness. Then we have this hopper lock right here because of the powering the block. That actually comes from the slice above where we have the redstone dust powering the block right here. And if we look at the system, this line right here also has repeaters every other block So we actually power the block and power the neighboring hopper, as well as deal with the signal strength issues of having such a long redstone line. As you can see, traditionally you wouldn't have all of this as one redstone line, but what ends up happening is we use the repeaters to keep the strength going. Now, moving upwards, we have the same thing up here with the repeater line, just using the powering of a block to power all of these hoppers right here, including this one, and then we use the dropper right here to lock this, but this is already locked with the system right here of the breaking the shulker box. Then coming here, we have the huge hopper locking line for the SSI filters, where we have a branch coming down to power the dust, and then just a tremendous amount of repeater lines right here and here, and then we have a smidge of dust right here to power as many hoppers as we can. So that is the whole system. It's super cool, decently compact for what it is. I mean, as you can see right here, it's not that wide in the scale of systems, and for what you're getting a full miss as well as bulk. I think that's a really cool slice. Now it is 50% hopper locked, but I'm willing to overlook that, especially for an early game or mid game. I wouldn't say this is early game because this is a quite expensive system, but a mid game sorting system, or a sorting system in between your chest monster and your main storage system, I think this is one of the greatest. This UI up here, not entirely necessary, but kind of cool. Maybe you can figure out a way to lock hoppers, but all of the hoppers here seem to be locked, so you wouldn't gain anything. Now, I really like the UI of the way we get we get the items, we get bulk, and then we have our miss items right here. But what I really like is the configurable miss right here, where we have access to the miss slice just like this, and where you can prevent it to fall. And you can notice that he has glass right here, so you can just fall and it'll be fine. But I really like how you can configure this miss right here. And so if you're using the system and say, hey, I have way too many oak logs, you can just pull it out, and then you can elytra fly all the way up here and configure an SSI filter. I think that's probably one of the biggest upsides it has for it, as well as just the insane 8 times hopper speed, or up to 8 times hopper speed, I should say. But overall, a really cool system. I really am a fan of this slice, I just have to say. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, I'll catch you next time.